Today, we are going to go over applying one-way Anova and SPSS, a case study on fertilizer efficiency. I hope everyone's morning's going well. And it's important to note that today we will cover what Anova is, how it works, why it's used, how to perform it step-by-step in SPSS, and how to interpret the output. We'll use a simple but realistic example, comparing crop yields from different fertilizer types. You'll leave today knowing exactly how to use this method for practical analysis. The agenda for today's lecture is going to start off with what Anova actually is. Then we'll go into why multiple t-tests aren't as efficient as Anova. We'll then go into the key assumptions about Anova before we use Anova. We'll have a brief overview of the data set that's being used for this tutorial and lecture, and then we'll go into running Anova step-by-step in SPSS. After, we'll check assumptions in SPSS and then interpret SPSS outputs. Finally, we will do post hoc testing, and we'll conclude today's lecture by applying results to real-world cases. Now, everyone should note that there will be pauses throughout to highlight common errors and real-world importance. So, just as we should start everything, we'll start with the basics. It's important to note that Anova stands for analysis of variance. It tests whether 3 or more groups have different means. Instead of comparing 2 means at a time, like a t-test, it checks all means together. A couple key concepts is it separates variance between groups and variance within groups. Then it compares them using an F ratio. An F ratio is the variance between groups over variance within groups. You need to know that if an F ratio is large, then it suggests that group means differ more than we'd expect by random chance. Otherwise, differences could just be random noise. Now, why would we even use Anova instead of multiple t-tests anyways? Well, with multiple t-tests, we often run into a big issue, which is error inflation. Each t-test carries a 5% risk of type 1 error, or false positive. And multiple t-tests also mean multiple chances for false positives, increasing the error inflation. Anova controls this risk. It tests everything in one overall analysis. This keeps your findings statistically valid and professional. So, imagine flipping a coin. Each flip has a small chance of error. If you flip once, it's a small chance. But if you flip 100 times, errors are almost always guaranteed. This can be thought of the same way as a t-test. The more you run, the more errors creep in. Anova protects against this by analyzing the whole group at once, which means less work, cleaner results, and much safer statistically. The first common assumption of Anova is independence of observations. Each sample must be unrelated to others. For example, if you think about in terms of plants and crop yield, one plant's crop yield should not influence another plant's crop yield. This is often guaranteed through experimental design, which means randomization and controlled growing conditions. If independence is violated, Anova's results become unreliable, and you'll often get misleading p-values. The second common assumption is normality within each group. The yields in each fertilizer group should follow a normal distribution, the famous bell curve. Normality ensures that the Anova test statistic behaves as expected. In SPSS, we will check normality using the Shapiro-Wilk test, and QQ plots. And finally, the third assumption is equal variances, called homogeneity of variances. The spread of data in each group should be roughly similar. In SPSS, we test this using Levene's test. If variances are too different, we may need a different type of Anova, like Welch's Anova. Now we're going to get into the fun stuff, like looking over the fertilizer and crop yield data set. So as you can see, there are 3 different groups. I'm going to highlight them. We have the A, the B, and the C. And you can also note that there are 9 in total. Our dependent variable is the crop yield, which is going to be measured in bushels per acre, and that is just titled as yield up here. Yeah. So this simple setup is perfect for a one-way ANOVA because it has one categorical factor and one continuous outcome. Now we're going to go into classifying variables, which is critical in any analysis. Fertilizer is the independent variable, or a factor, while yield is the dependent variable, or continuous response. You need to remember that if we confuse them, or SPSS labels them incorrectly, the analysis will fail. Always double check variable types before running anything. Alright, now let's move into SPSS and open our data file. So, if we look at a step-by-step understanding, you should first click File, and then Open, followed by Data. Navigate to where you save the fertilizer yield dataset.sav file, and click Open. When the data loads, immediately switch to variable view. Now here's a visual showing what your SPSS screen should look like after opening the dataset. And notice how the columns line up. Like I said earlier, we see that there's the A, the B, and the C. And within that, there's the yield category and the fertilizer category. The fertilizer category separated into 3 different ones. Now there's only 9 different plants that are used in this data set. It's important to note that this is a really small data set, but the reason why we're using this is because it's really easy to kind of grasp and understand. And at the end of the day, this is just a lesson about Anova and SPSS and just trying to work with both. So yeah. Now that we've confirmed the data structure, it's time to tell SPSS how to use these variables. You're going to set fertilizer as the factor. This is the independent grouping variable. Next, you're going to set yield as the dependent variable, the continuous outcome we want to compare. When setting up, the Anova SPSS needs to know which is which so it can partition the variance properly. Also, it's so important that you double check for missing data here. If you happen to miss data, it can cause group sizes to be unbalanced. And while Anova can handle slightly unequal groups, large differences can distort the results. If you find missing entries, you have 2 choices. Delete the incomplete cases or use a method like imputation, but only with caution and usually not for small data sets like this. If your variables are assigned correctly, you're ready to move on. So, the exciting part, actually running Anova. In SPS, you're going to click Analyze. Then you're going to click General Linear Model, and then univariate. You might wonder, why General Linear Model, and why not something labeled just Anova? Well, this is because in SPSS, General Linear Model is a flexible menu that handles Anova, Anova Cova, and MANOVA, and other related methods, all based on the same statistical engine. Once inside the univariate window, move yield into the dependent variable box. Move fertilizer into the fixed factor box. Fixed factor simply means a categorical variable whose levels we are comparing. In our case, that would be the 3 fertilizers. A quick example would be if you were comparing different teaching methods or drug treatments, those would also be considered fixed factors. At this point, we are almost ready to run, but first, we need to tweak a few options to make your output complete. But we are going to quickly look at what this would look like in SPSS. So, let me find my marker guy here. As you can see, there's Analyze up here. That was our first step. And you find the General Linear Model. And lastly, you find here. Yeah. And then, that's not the end of it. You're going to have to find the descriptive statistics box and check it, and the homogeneity tests and check it. Once you've done that, all you have to do is click continue. Now, it might seem tedious to double check every small detail, but these small checks save a lot of pain later if your output doesn't make sense. In professional or academic settings, wrong setups often lead to redoing entire projects, and always slow down here. If your setup matches the screen, you're ready to run the analysis by clicking OK. But a quick tip before running is it's also a good idea to save your syntax. SPSS can generate syntax automatically, which you can save for reproducibility. Before trusting your Anova results, we must check assumptions. First assumption to check would be normality in SPSS. So you're going to go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and Explore. You should click Plots and then select Normality Plots with Tests. And then you will run a Shapiro-Wilk test for each fertilizer group separately. It will also generate histograms and QQ plots for visual inspection. Even if your sample size is small, looking at both the plots and p-values gives you a much fuller understanding of the data behavior. Many researchers actually use both the Shapiro-Wilk and visual checks together. They don't rely only on the test statistic. So, how do we even interpret the Shapiro-Wilk test output? It's pretty straightforward once you know what to look for. A p-value greater than 0.05 will fail to reject normality, which is good. We can assume the data is normal. However, a p-value less than 0.05 would reject normality. Data may not be normally distributed. Look at the output for each group, fertilizer A, B, and C individually. If all p-values are greater than 0.5, we're good to proceed. However, if one or more p-values are less than 0.005, we have to be cautious. And options, if normality is violated, look like applying transformations like log or square root, or switch to a non-parametric alternative like the Crucial-Wallis test. Sometimes, if sample sizes are reasonably large, say 30 plus per group, Anova is robust enough to still be used. So judgment is needed, but checking normality is essential. Skipping it could lead you to completely wrong conclusions. Now, we check the second major assumption, equal variances. This checks whether the spread of crop yields is roughly the same across all fertilizer groups. SPSS already ran this test when we asked for homogeneity of variance under options. It will appear under the output called Levine's test. Interpreting Levine's test is pretty similar. If you see a p-value greater than 0.05, the variances are equal, and assumption is met. However, if the p-value is less than 0.05, variances differ significantly, and this assumption is not met. If Levine's test is significant, we have to be cautious. We might switch to a more robust version of Anova like Welch's Anova, or we could adjust our post hoc method to something like Games-Howell that doesn't assume equal variances. Now, a quick practical note would be that a minor variance differences are usually okay. Extreme variance differences are the real issue. Now here's a screenshot what the SPSS output for assumptions look like. You will see the Shapiro-Wilk method, or the normality test, and then you will also see, where's my little guy? Sorry guys, the Levine statistic. Now pay close attention to the Levine statistic, especially the test sig here. It's your signal for whether variances are close enough to proceed with standard Anova. If both assumptions, normality and equal variances are met, we're in great shape. If not, we can still move forward, but we'll have to adjust interpretation and maybe select slightly different methods, like Welch's or Crucial-Wallace. Statistical analysis is often about being flexible and adjusting to the data, not blindly following procedures. Now comes the key part, reading and interpreting the Anova output. SPSS will generate a table called Tests of Between Subject Effects. This is where you'll find the result of Anova. Look specifically at the row of fertilizer and focus on the sig value. Remember that a p-value less than 0.05, we reject the null hypothesis. This means there is a statistically significant difference in the crop yields among at least some of the fertilizer groups. And a p-value greater than the 0.05 is we fail to reject the null. This means no evidence that fertilizer type affects yield. Also, look at the f-value. A larger f-value generally points to greater differences between group means. But this is the important Anova itself. And this is important. Anova itself doesn't tell us which groups are different, only that at least one difference exists. If our p-value is significant, we will need a post hoc test to find out exactly where the differences are. Here's a visual showing an example of an Anova output table. Notice these key parts. The source column shows fertilizer and error. In our case, it's going to be FERT group. And then here's error just below it. This splits the total variance in between groups and within groups. Also, note the mean square. This is the variance estimate for each source. You should also note the f-value, the test statistic calculated as, and then you should also note sig. Sig is the p-value that tells us if the group differences are significant. Remember, a small p-value suggests that the fertilizer groups are not all the same. A larger p-value suggests no evidence of a fertilizer effect. This table is your main result. Always double check you are interpreting the correct p-value. And as you can see, our sigs are less than 0.05. So yeah, that would mean that the fertilizer groups are not all the same. Okay, so for post hoc testing, Turkey's HSD, this is typically needed if Anova has a significant p-value. The post hoc testing analyzes pairwise differences between fertilizer A, B, and C. So to run a Turkey's HSD and SPSS, you're going to have to go to analyze, like what was previously done, then to, oh my goodness, general linear model, and then university. Let me see if it's the next slide. Okay, so to run a Turkey test, you're going to have to go to the post hoc, and then as you see in this slide, it will take you to this page here, and you will click that Turkey one. So a few extra tips when running Turkeys. If your groups have different sample sizes or variance, Turkey's HSD may not be the best. In this case, consider gains how you should look for confidence intervals in the output, and if they don't contain 0, that's another sign of significant difference. SPSS will usually mark significant comparisons with an asterisk. Also, remember that not finding a significant difference doesn't mean two fertilizers are identical. It just means we didn't find strong enough evidence they differ at our chosen significance level. Post hoc results should be interpreted carefully. They are precise but should always be connected back to practical meaning. So now we're going to look at the visuals of the Turkey output screenshots. We have a multiple comparison table, which might look busy. There's lots of numbers, lots of pairs, but focus your attention on 3 things. Those are going to be the groups that are being compared, which, oh my goodness, I can never find my little, there it is. Which are the groups here and here. The p-value for each comparison, which are going to be our segs. And then the mean difference and confidence intervals, which here is that mean difference, and there's those confidence intervals. If fertilizer A significantly beats fertilizer B, the post hoc test will make that clear. And if fertilizer B and C are not different, their p-value will be above 0.05. If you find no significant differences after a significant Anova, it may be due to low statistical power or very small group effects. Always connect statistical results back to practical importance. This visual output is your roadmap to interpreting the story behind numbers. And then we also, it should be noted, we have the yield over here. It kind of organizes it a little bit similar with the groups here, and then it also has the sig here, which is our p-value. So yeah. Now let's connect everything we've done back to a real-world business case. Imagine you're a fertilizer company executive, and you ran this experiment and hired someone like you, a statistical analysis or data analysis, to find out which product to push harder in the market. If Anova and post hoc testing show that fertilizer C significantly outperforms A and B, you have evidence to 1. Ramp up production of fertilizer C, 2. Focus marketing and sales resources there, and 3. Price it appropriately based on its premium performance. Without a statistical test like Anova, you might just guess, leading to wasted investments. And this is the true power of statistics, turning data into smart decisions and making numbers and data into cents, and that cents into dollars. So, building on previous examples, suppose fertilizer seed boosts yields by 10 bushels per acre compared to A and B. You can now make a data-driven pitch to farmers and agricultural supply companies. Or maybe you discover that fertilizer A is cheaper and only slightly less effective. You might promote it as a budget-friendly option. Statistics isn't just about numbers, it's about creating value. Your Anova results directly inform marketing strategy, product development, and customer engagement. The business world increasingly expects decisions to be backed by solid data, and Anova gives you a rigorous foundation. So let's recap everything we learned today. Anova helps us compare means across 3 or more groups. Multiple t-tests aren't safe. They inflate type 1 error or false positives. And before trusting Anova, check normality and equal variances. Remember to use SPSS to run the Anova carefully. Set up variables properly and request key tests like Levine's and Shapiro-Wilk. If the Anova is significant, use Turkey's HSD to find out which groups differ. And always connect statistical results to real-world meaning, like product strategy. Statistics gives us confidence to act, not based on guesswork, but based on tests, validated insights. I want to leave you with one final thought. Statistics transforms raw observations into meaningful action. It's not just about running tests and reporting p-values, it's about asking the right questions, analyzing carefully, and communicating insights clearly. A well-done Anova is not just math exercise, it's a tool for discovery, for better decisions, for real-world impact. Thank you for investing your time today to learn this valuable method. I hope you now feel more confident both in using SPSS and interpreting statistical results. Have a great day, class. Bye.